Okay. So, it's Martyn Smith for Bass Sessions at Stourbridge Town Hall with the fantastic Craig Campbell. Welcome, Craig.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's
barely having me. Just came in the door.
Just got here.
Yeah.
You're, I suppose, a long way into a year-long tour almost, Craig, at the moment?
Yeah, it started off not being that way, but the first half went so well, or the first third, I consider, because Edinburgh was really the middle, so it's actually broken into thirds. But the first third did incredibly well, and I say that for my standards. I'm in humble rooms, but they've been doing very well. And then Edinburgh went off gangbusters. And we've added these dates, of which tonight is the third of a run of about, I think, 35 added dates up to the 16th of December.
So you're running until basically the end of the year?
Yeah.
How is that? Is it difficult sometimes to keep going?
Not to keep going so much. I like to work when I'm working, but it is a little bit like dots on the road. You know, it's I'm in it now, and I'm finding it quite difficult to do anything extraneous to this, like planning other tours in the new year, or calling friends, or petting my cat, or going horseback riding, or you know, I like to be recreational a bit. My mountain bike is getting dusty, and I don't like that.
So perhaps when you finish, you're going to take some time off.
Oh goodness!
Regroup, yeah.
Oh yeah. From the 16th of December until the 3rd of January, I've got nothing in right now planned, and that'll be all. You know, you have to kind of reflect on what you do, and that's, I think, in my life where humor comes from. So it's hard. Like right now is kind of practical. I've been on a motorbike in the moments before I've seen you here for like 4 hours, and everything that way is it's rational thinking. There's not a lot of lateral thought. You don't see a sign to Stourbridge and put a funny frilly dress on it and have a giggle to yourself where you hit things and die. So it's that kind of you know, it's not overly creative, and I'm looking forward on the 16th of December to having a couple of drinks and just putting my feet up and enjoying my downtime.
And that's interesting. Much of what you talk about on stage is observational, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
experience and observation.
Experience and observation. Now, do you find that by doing the amount of travelling that you do, that sort of feeds that, and you get more material through that?
It does if I have downtime, but like for example tonight, it's difficult to you know, people will want, as at most shows, to have me out afterwards and have a few Guinness and, you know, smoke a couple of joints or whatever they're planned for me. A lot of people I get Facebook thing, we're gonna get you smashed, and they mention all the things that they're gonna put in my bloodstream and pound into my eyes and various other things like that. But I can't, because I'm on my way to Doncaster tomorrow. And that's basically similar to every show that I have. I'm basically going to the next show. So it's not really as much of a party as it might seem to be. And in that way, I very rarely get experiences during the shows of the tour to actually reflect on stage. It does happen sometimes, and I cherish it when it does. But more often than not, I need a little more downtime to be able to have you know, things organically be created out of nothing. You know.
And then perhaps pull some of those experiences together for
the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the next one, excitingly for me, I'm just like still pinching myself to be able to tell you, this is the first time I've left Edinburgh knowing that I'm coming back the next year. And next year, or this coming Edinburgh, I'm going back with 2 guys that I did a show with in 1998 called the Lumberjacks on Ice, Stuart Francis and Glenn Wool, and we're bringing back the return of the Lumberjacks. So I'm just like, I'm beside myself. I've been, you're talking about music earlier, I've been getting, we want a real Canadian pastiche of an evening, so I've been getting all the Canadian tunes that we want to have the audience warmed up by, and have you know, Canadian personalities on the stage when we're not there, and people can you know, cherish or can reflect on the fact that Celine Dion exists in a world that we do, and you know, there's not everything that we're proud of in Canada, but I received Rush Farewell to Kings in the mail today, and that'll be keeping the audience going while we're backstage. So that's a show that I'm really excited about, and it's going to be a 2-hour-long show with all 3 of us doing stand-up and sketches and special guests. So like, it's months away in terms of like nearly 10.5 months away, 11 months away, and I am excited right now about it. And there's tons of stuff that I'm excited about before that happens. So I'm in a pretty wild world right now.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And a big, you hail from Canada, Vancouver, yeah. I think, isn't it?
I grew up in Calgary, and I moved up to Vancouver a few years after that. But I've pretty much been all over Canada and a lot of places in the world as well. So I feel like I've been away from where I grew up for more than half my life now, and they don't. I don't think they recognize me as maybe a Canadian, but not so much a Calgarian, which is where I'm from. They think I'm Scottish or Irish, if you can believe that, by my accent. That can give you some context for what Canadians think at any one time.
But now you're living in Britain and have been for some time. What for you, Craig, are the big differences between living in Canada and living in Britain? What have you observed?
How much I can do in a day, or in 48 or 36 or 72 hours. I've had in the last couple of years, since I was wonderfully asked by Frankie Boyle to open in his 120 date, I'd gladly punch each one of you in the face in Normodome tour. I've had some, just Switzerland to Norway, back to Devon, up to Scotland. Last October I did 42 shows in October, and you just don't know what happened. There's like 2 shows on a Saturday for Frankie and 2 shows at the Comedy Store in London at the same time as heading back to Devon and then back to London. Got to feed the cats 3 hours away and come back. And even this week I've been up in St Andrews and then back down to London and then back to Devon, and now here after popping into Chesham, Tring, the last couple of nights. The week before that was a Thursday on the Isle of Wight for Festival, back home to Devon the same night, back up to London for the Greenwich Festival on the Friday, back home that night. Saturday, wake up and go back to Festival Isle of Wight, do a 5-hour from 5 till 10 at night compare shift, stay over on the Saturday, do a 5 till 10 p.m. Compare shift on the Sunday, come back to Devon, go back up to London for a photo shoot for Edinburgh next year, and then come back for Tuesday shows. So I'm just like, this is, I've never lived in this kind of world. And in Canada, that's just not possible. You just like get in a plane and wait for 6 hours and get to another place, and you're lucky if you get one thing done in a day, but everything's just so possible here, and I love it. I love the intensity of it. I love making 2 planes in a day. I've come back from tours in Canada, snowboarding comedy tours, to arrive at Heathrow, to switch planes with a 2-hour window, to go out and do 4 shows in a row in the Alps for British people in France, and then come back and do a weekend of shows on the back of it. So, I mean, it's just like, from me even explaining what I'm up to, I don't know what the viewer might be thinking, but it's just, to me, it looks like, just like you're constantly looking at information and they're, okay, where's my boarding pass? That's okay, I got my shoes, where's my bag? Okay, everything's like in the pocket that you need, and it just becomes a little bit, it's exciting in a way that I've never lived, and everything, you've just got to be quite sharp here to be able to pull that off, to even come through like British traffic, which I love doing. Today I consider, like, I left 2 hours early at 3 o'clock to be here, thinking that I'd be early for like 6 o'clock to meet you guys at 7. I was picturing myself having a Chinese or something and doing my nails up until the time of the interview, and all of a sudden I'm here like 5 after 7 after 4 hours of riding, which I consider, I kind of wrap my head around getting into a workman-like riding mentality, because as anybody knows, riding is a very dangerous thing if you're flagrant with it, and I just get into, okay, I'm now driving as a job, fully concentrated. If I have an opportunity to pass, I do. I go the speed limit the rest of the time, and I maintain that. You don't look at, oh, that's a nice cow. You just become like in a bit of a tunnel of needing to get something done. And I like that. I apply myself well to it. I learned to fly since I've lived here, which is really exciting for me, and something I've wanted to do my entire life, but it's just since living in Devon that, you guys, I'm sure, I know we're close to a bunch of Norwegian rats, but we're also probably a couple of stones throws from airports. The UK is just covered in airfields, and we have one about 6 miles from where we live. And, for the first time in my life, I've been able to go up and just say, could I learn to fly here? Of course you could. And now if I look out the window and the weather's right, I've got a choice of 4 planes that I can go up in and, fly around Europe if I could afford to, but I've only been as far as France. But have only been able to fly to shows once down in Brighton, which was pretty awesome to land in Shoreham. And, the corridor from from where we live in Devon to get to Brighton, you've got to go through, you know, Southampton, Portsmouth, a lot of circuitous driving, and to be able to just kind of fly over top of it as the crow flies, and talk to a couple of air traffic guys in Southampton Control, and okay, good evening, you know, just like be in Brighton in 45 minutes, and after a cab, you know, be in the center of town in an hour is just like, this is a wild world. I've never lived anywhere like it.
And then you can turn up at the show and you can genuinely say that you've just flown in.
As well,
how roll is that?
For me, that's a big part of my persona. I find, and I don't like to think that it's absolutely dependent upon it, but I very much like the effort of arriving at a gig. And you know, people are always astounded that if I'm working in London for an entire weekend, that I'll return to Devon every night. And it seems like it's an inefficient thing to do for other people, but for me, the difference between waking up when I don't really want to in a city that's got a lot of noise in it and a lot of distraction and chaos, and waking up in my own bed with the window open and birds tweeting in Devon, and then having what for me is a very leisurely, I know it's hard to wrap your heads around in the UK, a 3-hour ride on a motorbike being a leisurely thing, but for a Canadian it's like, hey, at least it's not 55 hours. You know, we've got some, I've driven across Canada with once with a Scottish guy, once with an Irish guy, and just incessantly checking the map, and I'm just like, dude, you got to put the map down, because I can't even show you that we've moved. Like, you got to just relax now. We've got 3 or 4 days of driving if we sleep in the car and change drivers, and you just have to get into a kind of a different mode. Driving around Lake Superior, which, you know, I don't know if any people that are watching it have done, but it's like 4,500 kilometers around, 2,500 miles around it. It's like a 12-hour drive on the Canadian side to drive around half of it. And the Scottish guy just kept asking me, "What lake is that?" And I'm just like, it's the same lake, man. It hasn't changed. I know it might seem crazy that 10 hours ago you asked me what lake that was, and I told you it's Lake Superior, but it still is. So, you know, this is the world that we're coming from, and for me to come from London to Devon in 3 or 4 hours is just like very casual thing to do, and it makes an exciting thing, as for Stourbridge tonight, to be able to talk with people about. It's, for me, it's a very nice icebreaker to, as you know, as you guys enjoy talking about the weather, I enjoy talking about the trip arriving, which is another, you know, for Canadians and Brits, I think there's an easy meld on that one as well, because you guys you have a transportation not puzzle, but the options are, like, one thing I was thinking of on the ride here, and the momentary fleeting thoughts that aren't focused on staying alive, were the ideas that living in the UK is the first time that I've ever really been in a mode of where I might have to abandon the motorbike. Or like, and I have many times abandoned the car. Coming into London, stopped traffic on the M4 or the M40, and just having to pull over in somebody's district in the middle of West London, dumping the car, going into the tube's closed, running for a little bit, going to a train station, hopping in a cab, you know, can I buy your bike? Like, I've never ever been in a part of the world where you just have to be so fluid. And, you know, when people first get here, they might make the mistake, which I never do, of not having change on you, not having cash in different denominations, not having credit cards, not having a pen. You know, London and the UK is just one of those places where if you're not, like, prepared, if you don't have food in the car, people just, they'll use you for traction as they're walking over your prone body. And that's, you know, that's a kind of a three-dimensional world that I now live in that, yeah, it makes you a great traveler to live here because the variables are so varied.
And I read that perhaps your shows are one of the few things that you do indoors. You're very much an outdoor kind of a guy.
Yeah.
And I guess that probably has something to do with the choice of living in Devon in a sort of more remote parts of the country rather than choosing to live in a city or something.
Absolutely. But saying that, on the way into Stourbridge from the south today, from Kidderminster, I once again, and it happens almost incessantly on my tours, I'm thrown by how beautiful the countryside is around many, many bits of the UK. And I've been doing this little thing where I'll, when I have time, like I didn't tonight, even though I thought I would, I'll set my sat-nav to where I'm going directly from Devon, of course, but then I will adjust it for the walking route. And when I've got like 4 or 5 hours to get to a place, I'll take the motorbike on the walking route. And it's just like, you know, as soon as you get off the motorways in this part of the world, I don't think people really often reflect on how beautiful a part of the world this is. I've just come through the Chilterns and, you know, Stroud and all those, you know, beautiful, beautiful areas. The hills on the outside of Bath, you know, just really, like, there's almost nowhere that you can mention that doesn't in its own way, once you get out of the sort of main centers, have quite a bit of greenbelt beauty to it. But that said, you know, living in Devon, that was one of the reasons that, well, it's one of the reasons that we love it, but it's one of the things that I most enjoy about it, and just being able to go on a mountain bike ride without having to cross roads or to get into heavy traffic, to be able to go for a little run through the woods and not have to, you know, really run into anything industrial is really, you know, a spectacular thing. But again, I think that that probably exists in a lot of places in the UK, and people just really don't know it or don't look for it. And the other really wicked thing for me, again, as a contrast to a Canadian, is that the weather is great here. And a lot of people feel that the weather isn't. A lot of people are really, you know, overwhelmed with how crap the weather is here. I can see the eyebrows shifting now. It's like, yeah, some of those people might be here now. And but you know, when you're from a part of the world where a lot of times your, you know, your sensory organs are frozen solid while you're trying to figure out what you should be wearing, it's and especially as a motorcyclist and somebody who often has to travel long distances to get to shows, like the snowboard comedy tour that we've been doing now for 4 years in Canada. That we're again doing starting January 3rd this year. Last year we did 6,500 miles in 4x4s through, like, you know, 4 massive mountain ranges in Canada to 22 different resorts doing 25 different shows. And like, I can look in the camera and tell you, in all of my years of doing stand-up in Canada from like 1989, last year were the worst roads I've ever seen. And I've seen some heinous roads like snow and ice and whatnot, but last year was just incredible for snowpack, for glare ice, you know, for just difficult conditions. And not kind of, you know, people often think of snow and ice as kind of 1 or 2 sort of consistencies, but, you know, they're a fluid of water. And when you're driving for 10 or 11 hours on bad roads, it's not one type of snow or one type of ice. It's a ever-shifting monster that at any one time can be slush that you didn't expect, or the moment that you are not hyper-focused on what you're doing, even in a 4x4, that, you know, it's a treacherous part of the world to do comedy in. And I, you know, disappointingly, I won't depress the interview, but I know of all types of people that aren't here right now because of the types of roads that we have to get in between our main centers. You know, where my nearest big city to where I grew up in Calgary is Vancouver, and that's 600 miles through 4 different mountain ranges. And any moment of that can be your last. So to, you know, to hear people not enjoy a thunder shower in Devon or whatever, for me it's just like and not to say that you don't have winters, but of course, you know, it's just milder and tighter compared to. Yeah, so it's another thing that I just really you know, I really am not as shocked by the weather. The weather can be depressing here, I think, but not in the way that I'm used to, like dangerous. Does the weather regularly take your life? I was like, no, not so much here. You might get hit by a falling branch or whatever. I am aware of that. You get that kind of weather. And more than anything, when you do get a bit of snow or a bit of ice, I've got to be more conscious than I normally would be of other people's reaction to it. That in its own way can be like a bit of a, it's not that bad, folks, but I know what you think you're looking at. But that said, and I don't say that overconfidently, I say that as somebody who, once again this week and every winter of my life, invest in a good pair of tires to deal with it, which I say that humorously because I've tried to buy, I now like source them myself, but I've gone into my local tire shops because I don't like to be somebody that takes my money out of the community either. I quite like the sense of community in the UK and certainly where I live in Devon, and I've given ample opportunity to the 3 local tire shops that I can get to ask them to please get me some snow tires. That I don't mind the price, I don't mind if they mark it up, and they won't do it. I don't know if it's something to do with like who they work through as their supplier or what it is, but even if I say like, can you get me these tires here and charge me whatever you need to have them brought in, and they're just like, no, we really can't do that. And it's like, okay, I'll do that myself. And And snow tires are a real handy thing when it's snowing. I know they seem superfluous to needs in the UK, but it's they're handy, you know.
So we can assume for that then that perhaps that you could teach the Brits a thing or two about how to deal with a little bit of snow compared to what you're used to back home.
Yeah, well, that said, I wouldn't like to come from a point of view of like wanting to you know, to be in a teaching position. However, just suggesting that like I'll tell you what's odd for me here is that I've talked to many people that think snow tires are a scam. And that's different altogether than like whether or not you should buy them or not buy them. If you actually think that somebody just wants you to get snow tires so they can rip you off, that's like a whole new world. And for me, that's kind of a, you know, an odd thing to have to deal with. But that said, the flip side of that, which I love, and this is another thing that it's a very subtle thing that I really love about living over here, is that I've never in my life been so often talked out of a purchase that I was intent to make. Never in my life have I been on the phone to a company, a business, and had them suggest a bunch of different ways that I could not spend money on the product that I determined that I wanted and needed from them, like giving me other angles of, why don't you try inflating your tire and see if that doesn't help you? We won't have to rebuild your rim then. And I'm like there with my credit card ready to give some bike builder in the middle of nowhere 200, 300 quid to make me a new set of rims. And instead, they give me professional advice as to how I could spend zero. And I'm not, you know, in a North American mindset, I'm not used to people who have time to talk to you, to advise you, to not purchase something from them, while at the same time assisting you as they do it. You know, our part of the world is pretty much, they don't have time unless you're buying something, and they're never in a million years going to think to dissuade you from giving money to their business. And I really admire that. It's kind of a detriment to your business model here, but I really cherish the fact that people often here just aren't into ripping you off, and that's a really wicked thing.
Perhaps we've hit upon the answer to the current economic crisis. Stop talking people out of buying stuff.
Yeah, it could well be. The number I only know in my own life, but like literally dozens of times I've been talked out of buying things here, and you know, I don't know how many other people are experiencing this, but we can get this economy going. We're with you.
Buy more things.
Yeah.
You mentioned we're in Stourbridge because I don't know how much time you've spent in the Black Country, as we call it around here. Yeah. But you did mention that you prefer listening to Rush to listening to Celine Dion, which is of course good news. Perhaps music to the ears of the people
the locals
who live in the home of the metal music. Yeah. So are you a rock fan?
Not to the degree of like knowing a ton about it, but I know when my toe starts tapping, I'm enjoying myself. So you know, I'm not overly, not too specific music-wise, really. I know that I'm not a big fan of Celine Dion, or sort of like canned music, as it were. But I do like a wide range of music. But rock is certainly up there with it. You know, I love a bit of Zeppelin, of course. You know, we're in the neighborhood, and it's actually, that's a funny thing that maybe you guys don't have a window into, of how. Like, it's not until you start coming to Wolverhampton, Stourbridge, bits of, you know, Bromsgrove type of thing, that the music from here makes sense. Like, in a way, I don't know if you've experienced the first time I went to Australia, it was just like, oh, AC/DC, right. This place is just bleak and hot and terrifying, and, you know, just, you know, you can see the sort of what inspires that type of music, and I get that same sense in the Black Country. It's I get the sense you guys spend a little bit of time indoors, and maybe with the curtains closed often.
That's because the weather's so bad.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I do see that sort of like he's in the shed working on something. I can really see getting that.
You could go into a whole different load of connotations of that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. You seen the dog? Yeah. No, I'm aware of what's going on in the shed. Yeah. That said, I also a big fan of Tom Waits, which I don't know if what's he building in there. Do you recognize that song?
Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Just a wild song. But the one I've been listening to recently is God's Away on Business. Have you heard that before?
I don't think so. No.
Yeah, it's just I think it's a sign of the times. But God's Away on Business is the thrust of a song. There's a leak in the boiler room. The poor, the lame, the blind. Who are the ones that we left in charge? Killers, thieves, and lawyers. God's away
God's awake, God's awake on business, business.
Just a wild tune. So I do like all kinds of music.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
fantastic.
like a bit of Johnny Cash as well. You know, I try not to. That's actually something that's a real British thing as well. And I sometimes think it's only Celtic. But you guys you have really rich music, and people really enjoy music in the same way that comedy is a need. You know, I come from a part of the world where that kind of like artistic entertainment is somewhat of a just a periphery event. But here, people really like, it's a lifeblood here. People really like to hear new music. They like to hear new comedy. They like to, you know, live as well. Which that's the other thing that's amazing about that. You know, the market that we're in now is that it's. Like music especially, now that everything's gone digital and you can download everything, that all the big names are coming back into live venues. And to me, that's bread and butter. I never ever want to, as long as I'm able to walk and ride a bicycle, I want to be in a room full of actual people telling actual jokes. And I hope that we can give each other communicable diseases while that's going on, because I don't want to know them through the web, and I don't want to you know, have this kind of TV relationship with people. I quite love the fact that you know, this is real. That's what makes live comedy great. It's live. It's actual drunk people in a room listening to actual thoughts.
Because you were saying earlier that you prefer playing rooms where you can get that rather than some of these enormous rooms that comedy seems to be moving into.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was a reflection on that was John Bishop talking to another Normo Dome comic that I was getting the window into that. But for me, I do feel that personally, that if I was ever given the opportunity outside of just opening for really big name acts to be in a really big venue, it's not where my heart would be at all, because I really do, you know, prefer it's not that I prefer the smaller venue, but I do prefer the more intimate relationship with an audience. And that's, you know, to not be able to know what a heckler is saying, or even, you know, somebody speaking to you is saying, that would I think that would bother me in a real way that would detriment the show.
Just one thing, Craig, perhaps before I know you've got to go and sound check things like that. How much of an interaction during your show? How much do you get from the audience? How much do you work with them? How much do they contribute to what they hear themselves?
For me, as much as possible. And that's another, even like, you know, just been doing it probably now about 23 years, but I'm still really, really learning as I go. And probably one of my latest epiphanies, I would say, is how much it makes sense to me, and how much I enjoy as well, that the audience enjoys off-the-cuff humor. And especially, I wouldn't say that there's nowhere in the world that enjoys that, but I think British people, and you know, this last August in Scotland, I think the Scots in particular, especially with people like Billy Connolly as their idols, really, really appreciate the off-the-cuff banter. Just essentially like, because you know, there's lots of comedy out there, and there's lots of comedy that's scripted, and there's lots of comedy that's, you know, performed in a box essentially. But I think people are wary of that, and it seems to me a real icebreaker, and I don't like to get into sort of set pieces or material until I feel I've established with the audience that they think I'm funny to begin with, like just in a chat with whoever's in the front row or whoever's in the room. And I, of course, really enjoy doing that, but I sometimes forget how, you know, you get audience members that are just kind of, they're giving you the look, and if, you know, you wonder why are they doing that, and it just dawns on you that, of course, they're just scrutinizing to see whether or not they're going to find you in the slightest entertaining, and then they'll probably you know, settle into one of your stories. But I have noticed that if you just, like, if I walk out and go into a piece against a cold audience, it will be less well received than if I spend 15, 20 minutes. Sometimes I quite enjoy 25, 30 minutes in just having a banter with people that then I can move into material from, and I never lose that relationship with them, which is a great thing. That's another nice thing about doing your own shows, where I'm now doing like 2 45-minute, hour-long halves. So it's over quite a period of time, and when you're registering who you've been talking to and the relationship that you have with them and the relationship that they have with each other, there's a lot of there's a palette to work with there to create further humor from, and it's a real disservice to myself personally, to yourself as you do it, and to the audience to not investigate that, to just give them, 45-minute halves of stuff that you thought of on the way up here is just really selling them short as far as I'm concerned. And it's something that I have to, I have to remind myself before I go on stage. Get to know them. Who are you? They don't know you. You forget, like, I know me really well. I know my clothes, and I don't consider myself outrageous, but often I'll be like 10 minutes in and realize that the audience is staring at my weird shoes, or, I'll have a riveted front row. I wear these Vibram 5 fingers, so they're like a toe sock. And I'm quite used to them, but often people are just like hypnotized, banging each other to, I'm not really going to listen until I have these explained to me. And that's something that I have to in maturing as a performer, realize that they're new to them. They're, all this stuff that's old hat to me. They don't know some hairy Canadian that's 5 feet away from them, and they can probably smell as well as hear too loudly. So I try and introduce myself to them, and it's something I remind myself to do.
And I'm sure that the people who are going to come along to see you perform tonight in Stourbridge are going to do exactly that. They're going to enjoy every second of it. But you're also back soon in Wolverhampton, I believe.
Yes. Yes. I've really enjoyed coming to Wolverhampton. They've received me, I think, 3 times now with Frankie Boyle. I've been back to do 2. I don't like to crow about, not that it's necessary, but I'm pretty sure the shows were sold out in Wolverhampton for me, which is, again, I'm going into not massive rooms, but it's mind-blowing for a Canadian guy who lives in Devon to know that, 150 people in Stourbridge or Wolverhampton want to come and see him on a Friday or Saturday night. I know that seems a hard thing when you're, hypersensitive to sincerity of people's motives, but I'm truly bowled over by that. But in the same way I would be that, in Cambridge, or when I'm up in a couple of weeks up in Aberdeen, I'm coming from a point of view of someone who doesn't have a TV. I don't really condone them. I don't support them in any way. I like the world out there and the things that are in it, but I think people have a relationship with me now that they've seen me on television, and in that way that's feeding me to be in a live situation. So I'm sort of in a bit of a conundrum that haven't had a TV in my life for like 14 years now, but the people who are coming to support my show are seeing me on television and often are quoting things that I don't, other than the night that I performed live and had it captured by tape, know anything about. And I'm kind of in mixed minds about it. But I am, most importantly, just flattered. Just like can't believe that so many people know what I'm up to and are coming out to see me. It's great.
Fantastic. Well, I'd love to chat some more, but I know you've got something to do, Craig.
Got to go up there.
So we better make sure that people get everything that they're expecting tonight. So thank you very much for talking to me.
Pleasure. Thanks for talking to me.
Thank you very much. That's Craig Campbell for the Bass Sessions. Thank you very much.